Hey, what's happening, family? It's your man, Mark Black. You know what time it is. Welcome. Welcome to the broadcast, fam. Happy Hump Day to all of you. We are halfway through. For those of you who are my everyday working stiffs, this is my midweek broadcast to kind of get you over the hump. So I'm glad to have you. For all of you who will watch it live, and those of you show up later, this is the one to check out usually during the week to kind of get you in that good head space. You know what I mean? It's super important. Fam, before we get started, this one today is going to be, I think, pretty important out of the ones that I've done so far in this particular vein, right? So if you haven't done so, please, I do ask that you just put a link to the video, the broadcast on your social media, right? I know most of you usually do it anyway, but it's extra special important today to try to get as many eyeballs on this one. So even after the broadcast, if you think to share it, excuse me, that's going to be super important, fam. And I ask that, and I think later on in the broadcast, you'll see why. So before we get started, fam, for those of you who are unfamiliar with how, this thing goes, in the description field of every video, there's links to resources, reports, tools, you name it, right? Always check the description field of every video for links and stuff like that. It'll be super helpful for you. And also, if you find during any of my broadcasts that my work is salient to you, that it says something to you, that it does something for you, help support your man, right? Supporting your media is important, right? Media is not free. Either you're helping to pay for it or someone else is paying for it and thus control the message, right? And I've got a powerful need to eat sometime this month, and you can help me to do that by just clicking the links either in the description field or during the broadcast via the super chat. And also, if you have something you specifically want me to address, like a statement you want to make or a question, make sure to use the super chat. That's what it's there for. Even if it's just a penny, a dollar, I don't care, right? I recognize that my audience is who it is, so no pressure, but it's definitely appreciated. So before we get into today's broadcast, let me do what I always do and just shout everybody out that's here. If you come in, fam, just like you come into someone's house, you don't have to necessarily participate in everything that's going on, but let us know you're here so we can shout you out and show you some love, right? So in that vein, shout out to Unsunken One. Happy Hump Day to you, fam. Namaste to my brother John. Welcome to the broadcast. Black Man 903, what it do? Right? Alexis is in the house. Peace, sister. Love you. Miss Denny is in the house. Darker Visions is in the house. Shalom to my sister, my beloved sister, August Dreams. August Dreams in the house. Cool Unk is in the house. Sister Joan is in the house. Representing Bronx, right? So Miss Kawami, the beloved sister, Miss Kawami's in the house. Welcome. Welcome all of you. Brother Albert is in the house. Salute, fam. I see you. Welcome to the broadcast. Sister Tiffany, shout out to you. Welcome to the broadcast as well. And I'll continue to shout people out as we continue to go on. So, fam, I told you that I wanted to kind of pull back a bit from direct talking about politics, right? Because I wanted us to have the opportunity to be able to discuss this new understanding.
PA Slove Black Power, raised fist.
Right? Black Magic said peace, love, and black power. And peace, love, and black power to you as well, Black Magic. I appreciate the super chat. Thank you so much for that. I wanted us to discuss this newfound understanding around lineage and heritage from an expanded perspective, right? Because it has a great deal of power, right, in the political sphere, which we along with, Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore, Brother Pharaoh, among many others, a whole bunch of people have been discussing, right? Of various political bents. You've got people like T. West, who is a more conservative bent, who's been discussing the need to fight and stand up specifically for us and our people in the political sphere for our justice claim, aka restitution or reparations, right? But I have also come to understand that this newfound grasp on our identity also provides us with power across the spectrum. So, in with that being the thing, I think the most important thing that we needed to discuss, that we need to discuss and start operating from, is a basis of community. For those of you who were here the last broadcast, we discussed whether or not we actually have community as a people. And I argued that we didn't, because community requires certain traits. I'm not going to go back into it in depth during this broadcast. Please review my last broadcast on the subject to get up to speed as to what the difference is between operating as a collective and operating as a community is. All right. Now, by the way, shout out to Engaging Black as well. Whenever we as a people start talking about community, one of the first things that comes up or that comes about in that discussion is, okay, yes, we need community. How do we make that happen? Right? Because I mean, that makes sense, right? If you acknowledge the fact that one of our primary problems as a people is the fact that we lack community, your very first idea is, how do we rectify that problem? How do we bring about community? What is the work that we do in order to make community happen? All right. Now, I mentioned in my last broadcast, fam, two concepts that were key in order to bring about community. But we're going to put those on pause for a bit, right? By the way, those two concepts was acknowledgement of our identity, right? In other words, in the words of Yvette Carnell, claim the name, right? And grace, okay? I'm going to put that, though, on hold for a bit, because I think that we have a misapprehension about community. We think of community as something that we do, right? So when we think of community, what we usually imagine as a community, and this makes perfect sense because it's exactly what it is, but what we think of as community, or the outward reflection of community, is us coming to each other, coming around each other, living with each other, being around each other, working with each other, and so on and so forth. When we imagine community, we imagine community as us operating together, right? We imagine community as as us working together, living together, being together, the whole 9 yards, right? And that is important. The reason why that's super important, fam, is because physical proximity is a reflection of the internal connection that we have with each other. In other words, when you see us together in the real world, physically together, whether in relationships, families, in neighborhoods and things like that, that connectiveness physically together with each other is a direct reflection of the connections that we've already made mentally and emotionally. But we think of that as something that has to be done, something that we need to do to make that happen. And I want us to understand today that the most important work to create community has to be done long before there's ever actually any physical connection with each other, right? So in other words, fam, true community isn't created through physical proximity. We have physical proximity in most cases. In many cases, many of us live in neighborhoods that are predominantly us, yet we still acknowledge that we don't have community. So if we see the physical connections externally that are harmonious, that work, it is because there's been internal connections in individuals that allow for the creation of these external connections. You follow me? Pop a one in the chat, fam, if I'm making any sense here. Just let me know if I'm getting through. The physical, actual closeness, the proximity that you would see with us actually having developed community is a connection that's already been made in here. Does that make sense? Hit a one if that makes sense to you, fam. I'll just look, right? So I'm not talking past anybody. I'm not making no mystical statements or whatever the case may be. This is something that we can kind of all grasp. This is super important. Now, I want to show you an example of a group. I've mentioned them before, right? The Bruderhof. And I'll type the name of the group here in the chat. The Bruderhof is a religious community, right, that lives communally, that works communally, that operates everything on a communal basis. They have organized their religious community similar to what you read about in the book of Acts of the original Christian church community, right? They operate as a not a collective, as a community, right? Everything is communal. They don't have their own property, their own possessions and things like that, right? But there's been many types of experiments where people have tried to come together and build community. I was always told, fam, that if you want to be rich, you don't argue with a rich man, right? Or a rich person. Well, if you want to understand community, you don't argue with successful communities. You look for the information about successful communities that create or that foster the creation of successful communities. So with that in vain, Engaging Black says, sounds like socialism, fam. Hey, you know what? Socialism makes sense in a lot of ways. I'm not saying that that it's for everybody, right? Some people feel like that under socialism, they would lose their self, right? Now, that, of course, isn't true. I believe that socialism properly applied provides a foundation for people to engage the best parts of themselves, right? The biggest struggle that humanity has always found within itself is the struggle for daily bread, right? But through the application of mutualism, communalism, socialism, or whatever you want to call it, people are able to bring together their individual efforts to benefit the whole, so that the daily hunt for their daily bread is squared away, which opens up people to be able to be free to explore more stuff, to be able to engage more things, right? By the way, shout out and peace to Brother Craig, and shout out to Maid and Dave. Fam, I want to show us a video here on the teaching screen. This video was produced by some members of the Bruderhof, and they were talking about community, right? And especially intentional community, because understand, family, at this particular point, if we are going to bring about community, it is going to require intention. That means that it's not something that's automatically going to happen. It is going to require us to have certain understandings, to engage in certain things, and so on and so forth, which we'll get into in more depth later on in the broadcast. Okay, so without further ado, I want to go ahead and share this video with you guys. It's just a few minutes. I appreciate your patience, and I think what they'll have to say will make sense. And of course, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. Any important questions, use the super chat. Let's go on and check this out.
Welcome to part 3 of our fun little series on intentional community. If you haven't seen the first two, don't worry. You
can y'all hear that, by the way? Pop a one in the chat if the audio's good.
In the description below.
I'm not really sure why we're making a video called Why Intentional Community is Bad. Isn't that kind of like dunking on yourself? I'm not sure I want to be part of it.
Okay, listen. I'll make my case, and then I'll see if I can convince you.
Okay, give it a shot.
All right, here goes. So, for starters, the vast majority of intentional communities fail, like very quickly. According to an article I read on Eon, they fail at a rate slightly higher than business startups, and that's scary. Think about it. In order to join an intentional community, you have to make some pretty big changes to your life. Often you'll have to uproot, move, change your job, in some cases give up a certain amount of autonomy and private property, and there's over a 90% likelihood that the thing is going to fall apart. It's a crazy thing to do.
Well, if you put it that way, yes, it is. But the alternative for people who want to live in some form of intentional community probably isn't all that appealing either. If they felt okay about staying where they were, then they probably wouldn't be looking for a place to join an intentional community. Just like someone who gets involved with the startup, the risk is worth it because the payoff is potentially enormous.
You know, but in this case, the risk isn't just financial. It's about your whole identity. I read this retrospective piece about a bunch of aging hippies who got together up in Vermont a couple years back to talk about the demise of the commune movement of the 1960s. And at the end, there's this heartbreaking quote that stuck out to me. This poor old guy's in tears, and he says, "There was this brief shining moment when we knew it could work. We knew it could work, but we blew it." So there was this ideal, but the ideal wasn't enough to sustain them.
And yet, people keep starting them and joining them. Like I mentioned on the first video, if you look at the Foundation for Intentional Community website, there are literally thousands of communities listed just in the US and Canada. So what do you say to people who are inspired to step out and try something new and different? Go back home, it'll never work anyway? It's a bit of a cold shower.
No, I would tell them intentional community can't be an end in itself. It has to be an outgrowth of a more deeply held conviction about the way the world should be ordered. It can't be merely idealistic enthusiasm or a need for some sort of emotional or even religious fulfillment. That, to use the biblical metaphor, is building on sand.
Okay, now I think I see where you're going with this. So for us, it's the teachings of Jesus that compel us to live together. It's not intentional community per se.
Right, you're right. It's a result. If you look back at the history of the Bruderhof, there have been plenty of failings and moments where the whole thing could have fallen apart. But because the foundation was trying to live out Jesus' teachings and not community, it didn't.
I think you just wanted to make a clickbaity video.
If that would be true, it would be very niche clickbait.
Clickbait is clickbait. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. More niche clickbait coming your way soon.
Hey fam, thank you so much for checking that out. Yeah, Engaging Black says sounds like a civic group, how they moving. Again, the Bruderhof is a religious community. But I wanted you all to pay attention to what the guy was saying. He's saying that people always are trying to make community happen, right? He said, but the way they move, the principles come first. And then the physical proximity, right? The coming together, the gathering together of the herd is a result of holding these principles, right? The lady said that for them, trying to live the life like Christ is the basic principle that drives them to come together as a group, as a community. right? So I wanted to just reinforce that we've been kind of going about this thing backwards as Black folk, right? As Black folk, we've assumed that our melanin, our physical proximity should drive us together to create common principles, which would then allow us to operate as a community. When in point of fact, the very first things that we need to do, the foundation of the whole thing, fam, is us developing our principles. And those principles are what's going to drive us to want to connect with each other on a physical, in a physical basis, right? So what I wanted to do today, fam, and we're going to have a discussion about it, right? I'm going to open up the lines. We're going to actually have a dialogue, a back and forth. But I wanted to share with you the outgrowth of what those principles are, right? And what those principles will allow us to do, right? In other words, how we're going to do the work for community. We're not going to be working from frontwards to backwards. We're going to be working from the beginning to its natural result. All right. Agent Smith is in the house, by the way. Appreciate you, fam. Welcome to the broadcast. When we were discussing last week, fam, the idea behind claiming the name, right? Behind picking up the identity of the descendants of the enslaved here in the United States. We talked a bit about the inherent power in that identification, right? Now, there's, of course, a process behind the adoption of that idea. In other words, there's a series of steps that are the evidence of us having adopted or taken up that identity. I call this process is 3 steps. I call it the AAA process, right? In other words, if you follow these 3 A's set the foundation for then what allows us to actually have the physical manifestation. I hate using that term, but it literally makes sense in this particular circumstance. The physical manifestation of the inward community that we've already created. All right. So the very first thing that is required in this process, fam, is what I call acknowledgement. Okay. When you first hear the idea that we not only are just random niggas running around the United States, but we actually share a tie throughout history, lineage. When you first hear about that, there are many of us that actually have a negative reaction to it. You feel me? We have a negative reaction to it. When I say to a lot of our fellow tribes people, a lot of our brothers and sisters, hey, I am a descendant of the enslaved ones, like you. They get hung up on the idea of enslavement. They say, man, I ain't no slave. And they immediately try to reject that identification. Good afternoon, Tab Liquor. Welcome to the broadcast. I appreciate you. Happy Hump Day to you. John, I want you to keep doing what you're doing. Put principles out there in the chat. I want you all to think about these things as we discuss them. All right? So for many of us, the very first hurdle to get over is just the acknowledgement of the truth of the statement of who we are. You've got everybody wanting to identify as this, identify as that, identify as everything other than what we actually are. Shout out to my brother Travis, aka Black Dollars University. I see you, fam. Welcome to the broadcast and happy hump day to you. Acknowledgement, fam, opens the door. Acknowledging the reality of our existence, who we come from, the tie that we actually share with the brother or sister next door, opens up the avenue, right? It basically removes the roadblock, if you will. You feel me? Now, the second A I call acceptance. It's not just enough to say, okay, yeah, I'm a descendant of the enslaved here in the United States. That's an intellectual thing. Enough information can exist that you can accept that intellectually. What I'm talking about is a deeper acceptance, fam. I'm talking about an acceptance that takes that truth and makes it the lens by which you see everything move in the world. Essentially, acknowledgement is saying there's a pair of glasses on the table. Acceptance is picking up those glasses, fam, and putting them on. Once you put on those glasses, they're going to alter the way you see everything. When I first was brought to this understanding via hashtag ADOS, I knew intellectually that lineage was important, that it was a thing. But it wasn't until I started to look at everything in the world through the lens of lineage and heritage that this stopped being an intellectual acceptance and started to become something that drives every single thing that I see, desire, do, you name it. Am I making sense, fam? Pop a one in the chat for me. I want to know if y'all woke. Am I making sense here, right? When I talk about acceptance, I'm not talking about an intellectual knowledge-based understanding. 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, and so on and so forth. No, I'm talking about this being utilized as a frame of reference for everything that you see, think, do within every area of human activity. Acceptance of this identity and using it as the lens to frame everything. Everything. That is where, so if acknowledgement opens the door, right, allowing you to walk into the room, acceptance is what allows you to be able to plug into the power socket. The third A in AAA or 3A is activism. Once you've accepted, or once you've acknowledged who and what we are, and you've accepted that, that shit's so deep in you, you can feel it from balls to bones, right? It will then drive you to act. Remember when we were talking about invocation of the ancestors, right? When we talked about the power of standing in the shoes of our ancestors and being able to speak not with our voice for our justice claim, but with theirs, right? The invocation of our ancestors is what gives them second life. It's what gives force, power, oomph to our demands for justice, right? The activism comes from the acknowledgement and the acceptance. Once you have those two together, activism is the natural result. By the way, shout out to Dark Child. Welcome to the broadcast. I see you, fam. You'll know, people, when you have one of us who understands this thing, because every time you hear from them, every time you see them, every time you see them move, it is always in a way that looks to foster growth among the uplift to benefit those of us of our tribe. You don't even have to demand that they do so. You don't have to be like, yeah, y'all need to blah, blah, blah. When people have done this internal work of acknowledgement and acceptance, the activism pours out of them. They can't stop it. They can't help themselves. They cannot help themselves. The 3 A's, fam, is the process by which we gain that internal foundation for community. Those 3 things are what creates the framework, the impetus, the motivation that the result, the end result of that brings about actual real world physical proximity, closeness, community. I talked about previously grace. And I think it's important, fam, that we revisit grace a bit. Grace is unearned favor. And grace is the most important thing that we all need to be expressing toward each other as we start to learn how to navigate the gap between operating or being treated or seen as a collective and building community intentionally. Grace is that mental and emotional space that allows for reconciliation, that allows for healing, that allows for mutual respect. Shout out to you, producer. Welcome to the broadcast and happy hump day to you. Fam, if we were to look at the process of doing the work to create community, we'd have principle at the foundation of the pyramid, and we'd have grace at its apex. We'd have acknowledgement, acceptance, and activism at the base. And grace would be at the apex. We would have the 3 A's as the fletchings on the arrow, and grace being the arrowhead. Any attempt at us coming together actually physically, bringing our physical resources together, our physical efforts together, our bodies together with each other, is going to have to be tempered with a ton of grace. And there's specific reasons why this is most important for us. As Black folk who are seen as a collective but have lacked community for so long, we're atomized right now. And what this means is that there is as many different ways to express the life of people of our lineage as there are people of our lineage. We have different spiritual, faith-based, or religious understandings. We have different modes of living. We have different social classes and different things about ourselves. And without the foundation of having claimed the name and the extension of grace to each other, any attempt for us to come together physically is going to be doomed right from the outset. Because without that grace, we will tend to be very judgmental of each other. And we already are acculturated through generations of enslavement on the plantation, through the hostile killing fields of Jim Crow, and so on and so forth, to having a natural antipathy to each other. We've talked about this before, fam. We've talked about the fact that you could visit people of other ethnic groups and they have no problem with actually living in physical proximity to each other. You'll have multiple generations of them living in the same household. You'll have new babies. You'll have parents. You'll have uncles and aunties. You'll have grandma and grandpa. In some cases, you'll even have great grandma and great grandpa, all living in the same household. And those households will be part of a physical community. They'll have Chinatowns, little Vietnams, little Somalias, and so on and so forth, because they understand that the physical proximity is a reflection of the ideas in their head, of the communal ties they already know that they share. Because we have to actually do the work to accept, to acknowledge, accept, and work towards developing those internal ties. Grace is the glue that allows us to hold this shit together while we teach each other these principles. Does that make sense, fam? John said we need to develop a vernacular to promote the 3 A's. I couldn't agree more. Right? I couldn't agree more. As a matter of fact, fam, I would argue that the greatest work that we have to do today in order to have liberation, justice, peace, freedom, is to have a set of principles derived from our newfound understanding that lineage is really the thing that matters. We need to have our education, our connections with each other, our interactions consistently reinforce the 3 A's. Because that is the only way we will ever actually see the successful external reflection of the internal community we've worked on and created as individuals, as families, as neighborhoods, as groups, and so on and so forth. You feel me? You are not wrong when you imagine communities as groupings of us working together in common weal. You're not wrong. The only problem with us in that is that we see that as the goal. When in point of fact, when we see that, it will be that we have already done the work for community. Once we start to actually be able to come together physically, working with each other, eating with each other, living with each other, talking with each other, engaging with each other, marrying each other, making babies with each other, so on and so forth. Once we see that, and it's harmonious. It works. There's no rancor, no drama. That actually, fam, will be the result of the work we do toward community. Shout out to Soul. Welcome. I hope, fam, that you're starting to grasp what I'm laying down. I'm not saying y'all are dumb. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible so that any one of us can grasp this. I'm not talking about high-flung esoteric principles. We keep trying to reinvent the wheel instead of understanding that every successful community has operated the same way. You can think of community, fam, as the answer to a series of equations that are put together. You feel me? Communities happen inside individuals who then are driven to come together in physical proximity with others of like minds, of like circumstances, of like situations. The reason why those hippie communes failed, and trust me, I know hippies. I used to hang out with hippies. And I can tell you for a fact that the reason why a lot of those hippie communes failed wasn't because the idea of living communally is a failure. No, human beings have always lived in community, right? They have always lived communally. The reason why those communes, those intentional communities tended to fail is because they were working backwards. They were trying to take an apex and hold it in midair and then build a foundation. That's not how pyramids are constructed, fam. You build the base of the pyramid first, all the way up to the apex. Anybody can tell you that as long as you're trying to hang the apex of a pyramid in midair before you build the foundation, it's a recipe for failure. You can't do it. It's physically impossible. And just like it's physically impossible, fam, to suspend the apex of a pyramid in midair while you build the foundation, it is impossible for us to build community by bringing a bunch of niggas together. It's never going to happen. Because that bringing us together is not the beginning of community. That is the end of community. That is the result of community, is us coming together in physical proximity. How many times have you seen people put together plans, fam? Brothers, sisters, man, we need to get up on some land. Somebody mentioned it in the chat. They said land is the basis, the foundation. I could agree more, right? If you're going to actually live in physical proximity, you got to have a land base. You dig? Right? So that makes perfect sense. How many times have we seen people, brothers and sisters, put together plans to acquire land and it never gets off the ground? We've seen it 1,000 times. If you've been a part of any religious community, you've seen it. If you've been a part of any pro-black or conscious woke community, you've seen it. Neely Fuller was partially right there, Engaging Black, that we shouldn't come together unless we're doing something constructive. But there's a reason why that's only partially correct. Constructive community requires principles. And Neely Fuller argues repeatedly that our lack of codification is truly a lack of principles. Neely Fuller's code is an attempt to try to create a set of principles that Black people should be able to agree to in order to end up with the end result of community. And they're not a bad set of principles, but I argue that they're not enough to create community. But this acceptance, this acknowledgement of our lineage, of our heritage, this is enough to actually sustain, maintain, and grow real community for us as a people, as a tribe. But we have to understand how this thing is constructed, right? Black people don't reinvent the wheel. Stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Communities have been successful all throughout history. Instead, what we need to be doing is reverse engineering. We need to be taking the wheel and breaking it apart to its constituent elements and understanding those constituent elements so we can construct a wheel that allows us to move. And with this broadcast and with the series of broadcasts that I'm going to do on community, I hope for us to be doing that. Acknowledge the reality that we share a common lineage, a common heritage, a common history. Acknowledge that. You don't have to feel some kind of way because we descend from the enslaved peoples. That's a point of pride. It's a mark of distinction. Right? Thank you, Engaging Black. Let's talk about that. Engaging Black said, just like the Asians with gunpowder. Asians had gunpowder for 1,000, 2,000 years before the Europeans got their hands on it. The Europeans didn't try to invent gunpowder. All they did was reverse engineer gunpowder and then applied it to the applications that they felt necessary to apply it to. So instead of fireworks and shit, they made cannons. And from cannons, they developed muskets, harquebuses. And from muskets and harquebuses, they developed rifles. And from rifles, they developed pistols. They didn't need to reinvent the wheel. The essential recipe for gunpowder is the same as it's always been. Carbon, saltpeter, right? We don't have to try to find some damn new way that nobody's ever discovered to do community. What we need is to reverse engineer community, to understand how communities are constructed. So then we are able to then do the work needed to construct a community that is ours. That is all, fam. Everybody's been trying to convince you that Black people are the only motherfuckers that can't do community. You hear it all the time with us. Man, you can't even get two niggas to agree on what to have for dinner. Trying to get Black people to do anything is like herding cats. That's because we never reverse engineered community, fam. We never looked at what actually constitutes community. We've used these words, but we've never defined our terms. Why is it surprising then that we don't see the external reflection of internal community amongst our people when we haven't even actually sat down and defined the damn terms? Most of us will never have a access to a broadcast like the one I last did, where we actually talked about what constitutes community. Alexis said we need to start researching the best practices of building a community. Exactly. And I can tell you, fam, that I've kind of put in some work for you so you don't have to in some ways. Now, I grant you that moving forward, this community tech that Alexis is talking about, because this is truly what we're talking about. We're talking about using technology, compensating for the areas where we have a perceived or actual lack in order to bring about community. What we are going to do in this series and moving forward is we are going to look at what community is, What are the best practices of creating and building and maintaining and growing community? And then, fam, like the angry black sheep we are, we're going to actually work to build one. I said that I had an announcement that I was going to make when this series is done. I'm going to give you a hint as to what that announcement will be. After we have talked and discussed what community is, how to go about engaging in the process of building it and seeing the reflection of it, we are then going to actually put that process into play. We are going to not just talk about this shit. We are actually going to, I hope, build one. From the foundation up. I told you, we are not about talking about our problems here as angry black sheep. We are solution based. What is it that is best for the herd? And I can tell you for a fact, fam, we're not going to just talk about it. We are going to be about it. Like Unsunken once said, we're not just going to tell people, and that right there is how black people need to do community. No, I'm going to find and collaborate and work with other angry black sheep and any other interested party who is a part of our tribe or supporters of our tribe or whatever the case may be, and we are going to actually do the damn thing. So we're going to make it measurable. We're going to be able to show improve. Either we will do it successfully, in which case no one will be able to argue with us. No one will be able to say, you niggas is on some blah, blah, skippy, woo, woo. Nope, because we'll have the evidence. Or we will not be successful, but we will know why we weren't successful, and we'll be able to analyze it and frame that so that other people who are looking to make the attempt will be able to have a better shot at it. All too often, fam, all too often, we see black people engaging in this sabotaging of the future. If I can't succeed at doing it, I'm going to make sure that no other black people succeed in doing it too. If I make the attempt and it is not what I measured success to be, then I'm going to make sure that nobody else can even make the attempt. Nope. That is why we're starting at the base of the pyramid. That's why we are starting with defining terms. That is why we are starting with the foundational principles, the acknowledgement, acceptance, and activism that comes from engaging with the understanding of our shared heritage, lineage, history, and interests. And with those things in place, what we should see, if my hypothesis is correct, we should see the actual growth of real physical community. We should see the outward reflection of the work that we're doing internally. I'm doing the work. We're now doing the work together, defining terms, building the foundational principles. This is what's going to ultimately drive us to come together. We don't need to force that to happen. We don't need to make that happen. No, when we come together and start working together in common purpose for our common weal, utilizing our common efforts, our common energy for our common benefit, for our communal benefit, that will be a reflection of the work we've done already. That will be the end of building community, not the beginning of it. Sister Sherry's in the house. Welcome, sis. I hope you're having a good week too as well. Fam, the line is open, 425-296-1980. I want you guys to call and share some ideas that we can use to flesh out the body of our pyramid based off of the foundational principles of the 3 A's, right? Acknowledgement, acceptance, and activism. Thank you so much, by the way, Sister Naima. I really appreciate you. Sister Naima said, facts. I want to hear from you. What other blocks do you want to see make up the body of the pyramid? Let's have a discussion. And remember, fam, grace is the glue that holds it all together. Caller from 860, it's your man Mark Black. What's your name, where you calling from, and what's on your mind?
Oh man, I'm gonna kick it off right, Brother Mark.
I appreciate you, fam.
Always.
I appreciate you, fam.
Always. It's a great thing that you bring up the concept of community and stuff of that nature. Like me being a part of some of these civic organizations, I always get teed off with other communities that's excelling. Like I see like policies are in their favor, and I was more or less going at it a different way. And I'm glad that you brought that up. Like don't hate on this situation. Look at it from more of a constructive situation. That's a good thing that you did bring up.
I appreciate that. I mean, look, fam, what I saw was that ultimately any success that we have in any area of human activity fosters success in other areas. Black folk, our people, right? Our tribe needs to start holding some W's, because W's build on each other. Does that make sense? Right? When you start winning, I don't know if you play sports, fam, or if you into sports, but you ever hear sports commentators talking about momentum? Yeah, they've won, 3 out of the last 4 games. They got Mo on their side, right?
Mm-hmm.
We as a tribe, fam, need to start building momentum. We need to start getting some W's, right? Instead of constantly holding L's.
Like, there's a thing about the Greeks. Like, we don't want to get to the point where they celebrate every victory, but they got to the point one time where they were losing and they were still celebrating.
Yeah.
That's the only drawback of it. It was like a story that went along with that, where every time they had a victory, they had like an Olympics, or they had some crazy stuff that was going on. And then eventually they were still losing, but they were still celebrating.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also really dangerous and backdrop towards that community, which ended up being of their demise.
Well, fam, I mean, if you think about it, look at like a community like the Bruderhof, right? For them, the wins are every day. The wins are at the end of every day. Everybody in the community ate. Everybody in the community had an opportunity for good, honest work. Everybody in the community had an opportunity to engage with other members of the community in peace and harmony, right? Like, I get where you're coming from. There is a danger in trying to celebrate every little thing that pretty soon, look, if everything is worth celebrating, then everything becomes meaningless, right? If we have
that was more or less I was trying to get.
Yeah.
Without,
yeah. No, I see exactly what you're saying.
The other thing I wanted to bring up too was like towards like the guys of how they're doing business. That's the local businesses also reinforces the behavior in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and the guys of what I'm saying is like the businesses in that community, in that Bruderhof community, whatever,
mm-hmm.
It reinforces the behavior. Like, would you hire somebody that's not acting right within your community? So it reinforces a whole social behavior that I more or less was trying to paint.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first of all, in order to become a member of the Bruderhof, you have to accept their principles, right? But here's the thing. If you already accept their principles, you want to become a member. See, the Bruderhof didn't do it backwards. They didn't build a community and then require people to accept principles in order to enter the community. They built the principles first. And those principles is what drove them to come together as a community, as a communal group, right? That was what the two people were saying in the video. They didn't put the cart before the horse. They didn't do it backwards. The principles themselves, the desire to live like Jesus, to share that faith practice, is what allows them to maintain their desire to come together collectively as a group, right? We
What about the shipping containers? Like I want to speed up a little bit about the shipping containers a little bit. About in my neighborhood in New Haven, they have what they call shipping container communities, where everything is made out of that. I really think something like that would be a good experiment based off of that. Based on other sources that I have, other friends that are different. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you
I
good,
really
fam.
wanted to get that out there to build a community. But the thing is, like, I was getting on them about what's more or less the taxation of the situation, like how would the taxes hold up in our group, if hypothetically.
You talking
and
about?
how would we
Did you say taxation, fam? I just want to make sure I heard you.
Taxation, yeah,
Yep.
the mill rate,
Yep.
for the houses. That's what I mean by the form of taxation.
Absolutely, no,
because, like,
I get you.
In the shipment, yeah, because I was explaining to him, like, I don't think that shipping container carries the same weight, even though it's a durable product and it lasts longer and it's a little bit least expensive, but it's a lot more effective. That was another reason why I wanted to bring it up, because that'll be a good foundation block for a community if you can work out some of the mill rates and some of the situations behind that.
So yeah, I'll actually I'll let you drop off, and then I'll discuss some of the things like that physical physical application of it, because I have some ideas around that too that I'm going to shoot out there. I think shipping containers, I like the idea. The problem with shipping containers is that you have to modify them in some ways, right? Which requires some degree of skill, right? You have to have people that can cut metal, that can reinforce metal and things like that. There is that.
And that's our people, and we would be employing our own people, our own electricians, our own from the ground up. That's what more or less the ideology that I was more or less trying to get involved in.
Yep, absolutely.
It sounds a little bit extreme to do it for selferism, but I really think that this would be more effective.
No, I don't think it's due for selferism. I really don't, especially in light of the fact that any community that we see of ours, any physical community, because I'm not talking about just the foundational principles anymore. We're starting to take and apply those and starting to see what a physical community based on those would look like, right? Any physical community of ours that already has in its core these foundational principles, fam, there's certain ways that we're going to move just on default, right? You dig? Like if we were a part of a physical community, fam, and we needed somebody to be a nurse, it just makes sense for the community to say, hey, this person would be good at it, or somebody volunteer or whatever the case may be, and we just throw resources at them to go study to be a nurse. Then they come back and do that for us.
And then you normally, and when you look at certain other demographics of other communities that are in America and beyond, like if you go to like Italy or something like that, like you have a small village, you might have that doctor that would in the community that they built up in the community, and he stays in the community as a pillar in the community. Yep. Whereas none of that crap that you're moving to the suburbs and you're leaving your people.
Yep.
Like there's none of that shenanigans going on.
It is. And the thing is that a lot of the failures that you see in these so-called intentional communities, and I call them so-called because they require intention, but they're doing it backwards. Again, the biggest problem is that people are approaching this thing from the wrong end. They get the physical infrastructure, they get the plumbing, the draining, the electrical, the houses built and shit like that. And then they create principles. Okay, well, that's fine and dandy, but what if I don't want to adhere to your principles? Well, then I'm not going to come and fuck with you. Now you got an empty house.
You have a house that's just sitting there.
Yeah, exactly, right? Whereas if we do the work of understanding the foundational principles as individuals, those foundational principles will drive us to want to connect to each other. Dude, I can't speak for you, but this newfound understanding that I have based around lineage and heritage makes me want to be around as many and do as much for as many of my tribe's people as I can get my hands on. Like that shit drives me.
I agree. I agree even more so now. I feel like this was the family that I was desired to have a long, long time ago, or that was being presented. It's just that I didn't have the necessary tools, the information that we have today.
That's right.
We didn't have the understanding. I always thought in the back of our minds, like again, when we look at community, our community of ADOS started online.
Yeah.
A lot of communities, various different communities start online. So I really think that this manifestation is, or I know you don't like that word.
No, it's all right, fam. It makes sense in this application. So
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's going to like be fruitful in the guise of, especially if they start interjecting these principles,
Yeah.
injecting these types of things, elevate that conversation a little bit more.
Absolutely. Like that's the only issue I have currently with the so-called ADOS partisans is that this thing is bigger than politics. Like
Hmm.
politics is
It's way bigger.
important. Don't get me wrong, it's super important, but there's so much more power to claim in the name than just politics.
And the thing is, they need to have a story to paint that. Well, I don't want to go into further than that, but they need to have a story to actually solidify that situation.
Agreed.
To make it where it can be passed down and taught from generation to generation to generation. And again, I said something in the comments saying that our educators, basically the re-engineering of our situation, like my family are educated, they're not doing the job of re-educating and re-engineering their people.
Agreed.
Because out of being afraid of losing their job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
You know, one of the things that I like about the Bruderhof fam, and again, I hate keep using them as an example, but again, we don't. If you want to be rich, you don't argue with rich people, right? If you want to be a community, you don't argue with successful communities. One of the things that I like about the Bruderhof is that the Bruderhof take the responsibility for teaching on everybody. Every member of the community is a teacher, right? Each one teach one, like iron sharpens, like that's a biblical principle. Like iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another one, right? You're my teacher, fam, and I'm yours, right? And again, we've already, see, the thing is the best part about the issue that we have surrounding community is that all of the tools available to fix it, we don't need to go out and beg the white man, or not. I'm not saying we beg white folks, right? But I'm saying people will say, oh, y'all begging white people for this or begging white people for that. Well, you don't have to beg white people in order to be a community. All of the tools are readily available for us to do it.
I get you on that one, but the thing is, when we have employment elsewhere at other with other people or other persuasions, that's when I think that's where community becomes taking over. Because you're not aligning to the principles of your community. You're aligning to the principle of the job that you're teaching of that institution.
Yeah.
But if that institution was built by that citizens and those people, it would be a whole different ballgame. Yeah. You get what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, so the thing is, like I said, if we accept these foundational principles with the glue of grace, and I'm using a specific term here. I'm saying glue. Grace is the glue that's going to allow us to stick to each other, because we are in a lot of ways damaged through our interactions with the greater society, right? And because of that, without something that reinforces our connections to each other, we won't maintain them. And grace is what allows us to do that, right? The grace allows us that space to not be so quick to jump on another tribe's person because of what they look like, how they eat, what they dress like, what they talk like, who they married to, this, that, and the third. Like, at some point down in the future, when we have become practiced at maintaining, sustaining community, right? We can start looking at how we operate internally as a collective and start defining more terms, start defining more principles. But in the interim, while we're building that physical manifestation, grace, that unearned favor is what allows us to be able to overlook things that would otherwise atomize us, that would otherwise push us away from each other.
I'll say one more thing before I let off. What about, how come you didn't add accountability to the 3 A's to make it 4? Because I know that you need to have some type of accountability on both ends for that.
The reason why I didn't add accountability, to be honest, is because accountability is built into activism. As an activist for you, fam, I have to be accountable to you. Remember when I said in my last broadcast that I, as an advocate for you, have a responsibility to you to actually listen to your statements, concerns, issues, ideas, and all of that. The reason why that responsibility exists is because I truly cannot advocate for you if I don't know what the fuck you want, right? Like if I say, Yeah, family, this is what y'all want. This is what y'all need. And you're like, well, wait a minute, I don't want that. Like, no, that's what you want. How effective is that going to be? Right. So in activism, right, in the third A, accountability is built in. When you become an activist for our tribe, you seek accountability, because at that particular point, when you engaged with activism, what happens is that you are now looking at measurables. You're saying, okay, I've acknowledged what and who I am, and I've accepted that shit all the way deep into the deepest parts of my psyche, right? You then seek opportunities to demand that reality reinforces your acknowledged understanding and what you've accepted as real, right? And so, in other words, you automatically go out into the world looking for opportunities to reinforce, to buttress the acknowledgement and the acceptance that you already have. And that comes through accountability, that comes through showing and proving, accepting when things don't work, right? And working on ways to make them work, and so on and so forth. So the reason why, and plus, not to mention the fact, fam, the reason why I didn't bring up accountability, to be 100% honest, is because accountability all too often for Black folk is just another way of us beating each other up.
Okay, I can see that, but not in that. The thing is that how can we hold other people accountable? How can we hold the ones around us accountable when we don't even all hold ourselves accountable? Like, I'm not trying to use
No, you're right. No, you're right.
I'm not trying to use the WS talking point, because they kind of used the straw man argument with police brutality and stuff of that nature. And that's not the guise of which I was trying to go in the direction of. But when it comes to certain other things of that nature, I really think that, yeah, we need to have that.
The thing is, fam, is that knowledge isn't enough. We've already explored that. We can have all the knowledge of the reality of our circumstances in the world, and we know that that's not enough. Knowledge plus application of the knowledge brings wisdom, and wisdom and discernment allows for us to be able to even have standards to hold anybody accountable to, right? Because what we often see in groupings of Black people is somebody will create a standard and say, okay, you're bound by this standard. And then that standard, though, is arbitrary, right? Nobody has any say in on that standard. Nobody has any input. Like, I didn't have any input on ADOS101.com. I didn't have any input on that agenda. Whether I agree with some of the items or all of the items on that agenda doesn't matter. I wasn't consulted. You see what I'm saying?
Okay. But the thing is what sometimes this is some of the situations that I experienced when I was a part of that group. Like, when I was trying to implement those standards, or new like for the club rules and stuff of that nature, they, in the guise of, how can I say? I'm trying to, what I mean in the guise of that you, when I try to implement or try to put those, sometimes you need to have the words on paper first and then have it decide the second. Because if you don't have anything that's written down or anything at all, and it could still be, the thoughts could still be just floating around with no progression.
Yeah,
that's what more or less what I'm afraid.
No, I get
and
you.
I've seen that happen.
I get you.
Yeah.
Part of the issue is, like I said, we've tended to kind of put the cart before the horse. We've tried to see community kind of the mirror image of what it actually is. We look at us coming together in groups as the beginning of community, right? When ADOS built up numbers, right? ADOS built up numbers. Those numbers became the reinforcement for the idea that they're now creating a community. When the fact is that what created the ADOS community was the understanding around lineage. That is the drum that has to be banged on. The numbers will continue to come as people acknowledge the truth of those statements, right? Accept those, like, basically have a come to Jesus moment, for lack of a better way to say it, and then seek to become activists, right? So I don't think they've done anything bad or wrong or anything like that per se. I just believe that, again, we've had a misapprehension about community. We think that the physical community is the beginning of community, when in point of
And that is
fact,
the
the
last.
physical community is actually the end. It's the result of community that we've already worked to build, doing the work as individuals and then coming together in discussions like this and doing the work and making these principles and these ideas, right? So education, especially in this particular endeavor, is not a one-time thing. Because a lot of ADOS will tell you, oh, well, just you work avoiding, go get the knowledge, go watch the video. Okay, well, fine, you can watch the videos, great. But education is ongoing, right? There's a reason why in many fields you have continuing education, because continuing education allows you to take new information, new data off of the playing field and incorporate it in your overarching strategy, in your overarching understanding. But the moment you say, oh, we got it, we don't need no more education, this is the understanding and that's it, you don't have understanding anymore. What you have is dogma. And dogma is inflexible. It cannot change. So people are forced to try to adhere to the dogma rather than the information driving what the people are able to do.
All right, I'm gonna sign off. But thank you for the chat, man.
Hey, man,
As
no,
always.
I appreciate you, fam. I appreciate you as always. Thank you so much for the input. Fam, see, this is the thing. As we start to engage with this understanding, start to engage with these foundational principles, with liberal applications of the glue of grace, what we will start to see is the fostering of the physical connections being made, and not only being made, but maintained and sustained, because they're not being driven by building an external edifice that is weak, that is subject to being attacked, subject to failure, and so on and so forth, but by being buttressed on an inner edifice of ideas, subject to information and data and testing, to being shown and proved. You feel me? Family, y'all are having a great discussion in chat. You know, Alexis said, part of me wants to burn this whole country down and begin anew on a whole different system rooted in fairness where we rule, right? You know what? I'll admit that I have those moments where, because, fam, I don't talk about my political or philosophical bent all that often. But if you want to talk about somebody trying to live the principles that they share, that they're sharing with people, not to toot my own horn here, but I have spent the last year or better fighting political battles with people I don't even share political ideology with. I'm an anarchist politically. I don't want a government. I think no one can be trusted with power. The only way power should ever be wielded is when it's devolved to the lowest levels, meaning that everybody equally has power to be able to say yay or nay, to move or not, voluntarily. Yet I've been engaging with Republicans, I've been engaging with Democrats and statists of all types. Why? Because this thing is bigger than Mark Black. My people are not anarchists. They still think government is reasonable, government makes sense, that government can work. So as an activist, as someone who loves them and who is working to fight for them and on their behalf, I have to meet my people where they are. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is what this newfound understanding has the power to do. It allows you to be able to work to the benefit of people that under normal circumstances you would never even want to engage with. An anarchist would normally see statists of any type as political economic enemies. Yet one of your greatest advocates for you in this political sphere is an anarchist. There is a set of principles, fam, that come from acknowledging who and what I am and accepting that all the way to my inner core. There is a power that comes from that allows me to be able to engage in activism for all of you, regardless of what you look like, what you dress like, who you fucking or not fucking, what you eat, what you believe or don't believe, what you think politically or don't think politically. Caller from 214, it's your man Mark Black. What's your name, where you calling from, and what's on your mind? Yeah, I can hear you just fine. There's a little noise in the background. Maybe you kind of shuffling around, but I can hear you just fine.
Yeah, my bad. I'm walking right now.
Oh, be safe out there, fam. What's good with it? What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
I just called D. I was just listening to you, and you know, I heard that point you said just a moment ago on. Man, I lost the thought already. The question I want to ask you is, I feel a lot of what you're saying, but at the same time, that's what it was. That our people aren't on the level that you're on, right? And like I feel a lot of what you're saying, but I feel that's the same kind of dynamic with this whole ADOS thing, where I mean, this whole kind of conversation about community and how to build it and engineer it, that's completely missing from the discussion, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the data. It's all about the numbers. There's no kind of social or cultural connection to what all of this even means, what it even means to be ADOS.
I would agree with you.
So I'm trying to figure how. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure like how do you even inject that into it this far into the game?
So here's the thing, right? I'm a firm believer of the idea or concept that when people tell you who they are, believe them. That doesn't mean that people can't change, but that means is that you can't assume that people are going to be any different than what they are, right? You just have to go with where people are. And I think that the way, so think about this, fam, as Black folk, right? One of the things that is most convincing to us is somebody showing us the rightness of their position, right? So let's say that you got a brother in your community who comes up with an idea, all right? And this brother goes out and he puts his ideas into making, all right? And he, by the standards that he set, is a success in implementing those ideas, right? When he comes back to the neighborhood, who can argue with him? There's no discussion really to be had. You can either say, well, damn, fam, or you can be like, I want to do what he's doing, right? At a certain point, ideas have to be lifted off of the tongue, off of the page, and actually tried in the real world. And what this simply means is, fam, is that some of us are going to have to be the trailblazers, as always. Our people have learned to be inherently conservative, to be risk adverse, to not take risk with shit, because we usually don't get do-overs, right? So that makes sense. This means that any new ideas that could work to our people's benefit are going to have to be actually put into practice. We got to stop trying to proselytize people so much, fam. That's if I could come up with any way to answer your question, it would be that, right? If you think your idea, because one of the things that I give Yvette credit for is she'll tell you in a minute, if you think your way better, go do it, right? Don't come telling us and trying to proselytize us. And we've seen throughout the history of hashtag ADOS that going and trying to proselytize them to embrace an idea that they didn't think of their own or whatever the case may be is a losing proposition. They're not going for it. You feel me? So what
Right.
ends up happening is that you're kind of out here trying to find a way to bring about something, to make something happen so that it can be a success by any measurement, so that you can then use your success as your argument. So that way you're not having to proselytize them. You could just demonstrate what it is that you've done, and they can either go, damn, look at what them brothers and sisters is doing over there, and want to get on board, or they can cancel themselves out. But that requires us to actually resist the temptation to continue to proselytize and try to convince people all the time. Nothing convinces better to black people than actually seeing and putting hands on the shit, right? If you get a group of brothers and sisters
Right.
who've taken the foundational principles behind lineage first, heritage first and foremost, and have actually built something in the real world off of it, there ain't much arguing that can really go on. There ain't much proselytizing that needs to happen. That's kind of where I'm at. What do you think, fam?
I mean, I hear it. I hear it, but I'm not a fan. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not
No,
a
it's
fan
it's
of
fair enough.
their
Like I
thoughts on.
said, fam, this isn't gonna be
But
one of those things where if you don't get on board with this, we're gonna shade you. We're gonna tell you how stupid you are,
okay,
and this, that,
yeah,
and the, that's not it, fam. It's
right.
for you, but it's for you
That's
when you're ready for
right.
it to be for you.
And see, that's my point. That's the point I was getting to. Is that it seems. I mean, there's people out there that are making moves in their own regard, and I've seen them targeted for doing it,
I know that.
for actually trying something, right?
Yeah, I know exactly
Trying
what you're
something in
talking about.
their own mode, and it's like a takedown. And it almost seems to me there's a culture being formed, I should say, where any attempt that's not within the parameters of ADOS needs to be questioned and scrutinized, and ultimately, I guess, relegated, made
Yeah.
irrelevant.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. The thing is though, is that one thing that I've learned in this engagement with my brothers and sisters, especially via the vehicle known as hashtag ADOS, is that ideas have power. So much power, in fact, that most people are afraid to even look at them. Right? Like anybody could have picked up the idea of lineage and looked at it and rotated it around and played with it and smelled it and tasted it and said, holy shit, this means that X, just like I did. Like I said, I don't just see lineage as an intellectual thing, an understanding, a knowledge thing. For me, lineage is everything. It exists in my deepest core, right? It literally drives my actions, my thought processes, my feelings even. You feel me? Now anybody could have done
Yeah.
that, and some people have. Those are the people that I, as Mark Black, the angry black sheep, are talking to. That's not everybody yet. And the best part about it is I don't have to wait for it to be everybody. All we need is the people we need, right? In other words, I want those people that are at this place. Those who are not, they can't kill it anyway because the foundational principles behind it are unattackable. They're unassailable. Tell me this, fam, because I get your reticence. But let me ask you a question. How can hashtag ADOS take down any attempt that we make on actually building physical representations of the internal community that we built off of the same understanding that they claim to adhere to? In other words, how can they take us down without denying lineage first, without denying heritage first, without denying our ancestors? How can they do it? Because that's what this thing is going to be built of. That's the internal construction that buttresses the physical outgrowth of it. How can they take that down?
I would give Claude Anderson, Dr. Claude, as an example. I mean, he was preaching maybe not in terms of the whole methods, but the ideology, the idea of lineage and looking out for us and making moves politically. He laid the foundation for that, for what ADOS has introduced, you know. And I mean, he's been attacked. I just don't like him, man. I'm not gonna lie.
No, I feel you,
I
fam.
really rock with you.
I feel you.
I rock with you though.
You know what? Here's the thing.
I mean, you're on point.
Here's the thing, fam. I can show you better than I can tell you, right? If we're able to make something come to fruition, fam, there won't be no need for us to try to convince you, right? My job is not to try to convince you, right? I want to gather up the folk that are already where I'm at in this thing and see what we can do with the tools that we've gained from the acknowledgement of our lineage and heritage, from the acceptance of it, and this desire that is born from that for activism, right? That's not everybody. That's not where everybody is, right? So I can respect that that's not where everybody is. I don't have to put that on you, be like, oh, you niggas y'all don't never learn nothing. Y'all never figure this out. Nope, that's not me, fam. If I'm doing this for you, why would I do that to you? Why would I shit on you because you're not there where I'm at just yet? You see what I'm saying? I don't have to shit. All I have to do is just build it. You feel me? So no, fam, we good. I respect you having enough courage to tell me that you have concerns, that you have worries. That's all right, fam. I appreciate hearing that from you, because that means that we have work to do. That's not nothing on you. That's on those of us who claim to be advocates for you, that claim to be activists for you. We have to show you something. That's our responsibility. And I appreciate that you trust us enough to tell us, hey, I'm liking where you at, but I need you to uphold your end. I appreciate that, fam. I really do.
Hey, I mean, I think you upholding your end. Like I say, you're on point with it. I really rock with everything you're saying. You're bringing a perspective of this whole talk of lineage that really is missing, and it's needed if we're actually going to mean what we say.
Absolutely,
and achieve what we're working towards. So
absolutely, and I appreciate that, fam. I really do. Like I tell you all the time, the honor is mine, right? The pleasure is mine. With my last breath, I'm gonna be fighting for my people. And you can trust in that, because it's not an understanding, fam. It's in me. It's in me. I don't even know how else to say it. It's in me. I was built for this shit.
I get it.
I appreciate you, fam. Hey, thank you so much for your time, man. Thank you so much for sharing your concerns with me. Stick around. We've only just begun, fam.
Yeah, I'm still there.
All right, bro. I appreciate you, man. Peace. Caller from 301, it's your man Mark Black. What's your name? Where you calling from? And sorry, here we go. Caller from 909, it's your man Mark Black. What's your name? Where you calling from? And what's on your mind? Oh, Skype crashed. My bad, fam. Give me just a second here. And there we go. All right, caller from 469, it's your man Mark Black. What's your name? Where you calling from? And what's on your mind?
Hey, this Soul, man. It's Soul.
Soul, what's good, fam? Glad to hear from you. Talk to me.
Yes, sir. Outstanding, man. I love your topic.
Thank you, fam.
I've been watching Pastor Dow with Straightway Truth, and he's a Hebrew Israelite, and they've been showing how they building houses on land and buying land, and it's all kind of YouTube examples out there with people like Pastor Dow.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep,
matter of fact, Pastor Dow, you said?
Yeah, Straightway Truth.
Straightway Truth. Straightway Truth. Straightway Church Pastor Dow. Okay, yeah, I'm going to check the brother out when the broadcast is over. I'm going to subscribe to his channel. But go ahead, fam. Yeah. What you want to talk to us today about, man? How you feel about this topic? What do you want to contribute to it?
Yeah, well, that's what I was. Yeah, I was liking what you were saying, talking about building the community and stuff like that. And I was like it was like what you were saying about developing the principles first, because like I like Pastor down, but I'm not down with the Hebrew Israelite stuff. So, you know, I could never be a part of it because they require that, you know. So, but I love everything else that they doing, you know what I'm saying? But
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And
but
see, the thing is
yeah,
that I'm very fortunate, fam. I really do feel that. And I'll explain to you why I feel fortunate. I don't share any of y'all's religious faith. I'm an atheist. I don't share
right,
any of your political aims. I'm an anarchist. I'm the
right,
ultimate black sheep, the ultimate outsider. I don't truly fit in with any of you, right? So the thing is that if I'm able to put together principles that allows for any of us to come together, those principles by their very nature will allow all of us to come together, because I'm not
right,
advocating for this particular principle over this one, or this particular religion over this one, or this particular
right,
lifestyle over this one, right? I am
right,
truly working, fam, my ass off to come up with a set of foundational principles centered around our lineage and heritage, because I believe that my Hebrew brothers and sisters is on to something, right? I don't have a
right,
problem with them identifying as Judah. Not at all.
right,
Just like I don't have a problem with my Christian brothers and sisters identifying as the body of Christ, right? They can identify with any of that. They're still my tribes people. They are my
right,
tribes people plus members of the tribe of Judah. They are my tribes people plus members of the body of Christ, right?
right,
My Our lineage is what gives us that overarching thing, combined with the glue of grace that I'm talking about, that allows
right,
for all of us to be able to engage. Look, fam, the way I don't want to give too much away, but because like I said, I'm actually going to put together the mechanism. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to put together a mechanism which will allow us to actually build a physical manifestation of the internal community that I'm talking about, right? This community
outstanding,
will be able to have everybody of any faith, anybody of any, way of being. Look, as long as you share our lineage and our heritage, and that drives your advocacy, you in. Those
right,
foundational
right,
principles right there will allow us to be able to engage with each other where we normally wouldn't be able to engage. Because, like I said, fam, if it was just based off of ideological principles and shit that I hold, I couldn't fuck with many of my tribe's people. If I only cleaved to my philosophical positions, right, there's no way I could do this for you. That's how I know the
right,
power inherent in this process, because I'm a living reflection of this power inherent in claiming the name through the process of the 3 A's: acknowledgement, acceptance, and activism, right? I'm living proof
okay,
of it.
okay,
So I know that if I'm able to continue to try to um, educate my people as to the power inherent in the process, the power inherent in claiming the name, in grace, the
right,
physical manifestation of that will happen. It's going to be a result of that. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm
right,
excited, fam, because like I'm with you. I don't think you should have to accept any particular religion or whatever the case may be to be treated with care, concern, looked out for, supported, uplifted, maintained, sustained, grown by your tribe. Of course not.
right, right,
Of course not. And if I have any capability to make that a reality, that is what I'm aiming for. So again, fam, I'm right there with you. I'm gonna check out Straightway Live. Again, I don't want to argue with success, but
right,
Alexis said
right,
it best in the chat just now. She said we need to start dreaming our wildest dreams, and not just dreaming our wildest dreams, but actually start bringing those motherfucking wildest dreams to reality. Look, I look forward to the
yeah,
day when our tribe looks to build heaven for us here rather than wait
Right.
for it
Right.
later. I don't care what that heaven might look like to some of you, right? To some of
Right.
you, heaven is being able to make the salat 5 times a day, give your zakat to the community, and you know,
Yeah.
and live how you live. For some of you,
Right.
you know, heaven looks like kissing babies, educating them, and doing some hard work.
Right.
For some of you, heaven looks like laying in a field of grass, thinking on ideas that you can bring to the community. I want heaven for
Right.
all of us,
For sure. For sure.
and we
And I
can
think
make
you
that
said
happen. We now have the
we owe
weapon.
that to ourselves. I think you said we owe that to ourselves.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
reparations we could give to ourselves right now. Reparations, the basis
Right.
of reparations is repair, right? We do need this
Right.
nation to repair us, right? ADOS isn't wrong. ADOS isn't wrong in saying that that economic repair and political repair is going to come through the United States government. We know that, and we should all be on board with advocacy toward that, right? But there are other
Right.
repairs that we need that, guess what? We actually have the tools laying right here in front of us to be able to start to repair those repairs.
Right.
All we need to do is
Right.
just to have the desire, the will, the motivation to pick those tools up and start using them. That's where I come in.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
Yeah, so I appreciate you, fam. I mean, you know, the thing
Yes,
is
sir.
that there's nothing wrong with you wanting to maintain yourself, your personal self, whatever ideas and things like that over time. Like, let's say that we did build a community, a physical community based on these principles, where we've got all of these
Right.
people from all different walks of Black life in this country, right? Over time, our
Right.
communities are going to be molded and shaped by the people that make them anyway, right? So over
Right.
time, our communities are going to grow organically, naturally, the way they're supposed to, based off of
Right.
foundational principles that anybody who is a member of our tribe can embrace.
Right. Yeah. That's what's up, man.
Hey, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I'm right there with you, fam. I trust me. I'm doing this for you. I don't ever want you to feel like that you have to be something else in order to be with us. That's not how tribe works. You're born into
Right.
a tribe. You look, you are Navajo. If you're born Navajo, you are born Navajo. You don't stop being Navajo
Right.
because you cut your hair on one side and everybody else cut their hair on another side. You don't stop being Navajo because you know, wear different pants or no pants at all, right? You don't stop being
Right.
Navajo if you eat this as opposed to that, or don't eat this as opposed to that. Navajo
Right.
is your lineage. It's your tribe. You're that if you're nothing else.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what's going to save
And
us, fam.
yeah. And what I like about them so much is they have certain guys that might have issues keeping jobs or whatever, where they let them work on the land.
Yeah.
Then they have guys that thrive in corporate America or whatnot, and they go out and make money.
Let me
know
tell
what
you
I'm saying?
something, man.
But
The
everybody's
Bruderhof,
growing and building.
the Bruderhof actually has their own businesses. There's a Bruderhof community in New York that has a business building playground toys. And they sell those playground toys to different jurisdictions like cities, towns, you know, states and shit
Right.
like that, right? But the bread that comes in,
Right.
everybody eat.
That's what's up.
You see what I'm saying? Like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. This isn't rocket science, fam. There's no reason why those people can have that and we can't.
Right.
All roads lead to our lineage. Everything stems from that. That is the root, the foundation. And that's the one thing that, regardless of what other principles, ideas, ideologies that you might hold, you can still engage. I can engage with any member of my tribe. And I can engage with them in love, in unearned favor, in grace.
Right.
I don't have to agree
Right.
with them cutting their hair a certain way or piercing their ears or having 2 or 3 wives or 5 husbands or, you know, whatever. I don't have to agree with none of that. They're my people.
Right.
It's as simple as that. That's all we need to know.
Right. That's right. That's right.
So let's do this. You see what I'm saying? Like let's start dreaming the impossible dream and make that shit
Yeah.
happen.
That's what's up, man. That's what's up. Yeah. I like that, man. I sure appreciate you sharing this.
Hey, no, man. It like I said, this is my honor. This is my advocacy. This is my activism. This is what acknowledgement and acceptance of my lineage has driven me to do, fam. The honor is truly all mine.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate you, fam. Thank you. Peace. Fam, I'm telling you, it's crazy. When I woke up to the real power inherent in claiming the name, fam, I've been on a high that I can't even describe to you. There's nothing that happens in the political sphere that gets me down. There's nothing that happens in the economic sphere that gets me down. Why? Because I have generations of ancestors, one with their hands up to each other's back. And each of them, all of them, got their hands on my back, pushing me forward, driving me to advocacy, driving me to reach out to you, to cleave to you, to fight for you, to bleed for you, to live for you, to die for you if need be. And it goes beyond my own individual political understandings or economic understandings or religious understandings or the lack thereof. We have the best tool available via our heritage and our lineage to do great works. I look forward to the day when we have built things, fam, based off of these foundational principles where we can be like Ozymandias, where we be like, look upon my works, ye mighty, in despair. When our historic and current oppressors look at what we've done based off of these foundational principles and go, damn, we fucked up. There's no way to stop them now. If you don't think that can happen, I'm here to disabuse you of that notion. This is the debt we owe to ourselves. This is the reason why our ancestors brought us here. Calling from 909, it's your man Mark Black. What's your name, where you calling from, and what's on your mind?
The stakes is high. I'm calling from California.
Stakes is high. What's good, fam? Good to hear from you. Talk to me.
It's a good show. It's interesting what you said about communities, because the way I look at community is this, and this is what guides my interaction. Whether it be I'm interacting with supporters of Joe Biden, supporters of this economic class, sexuality, whatever classification that there may be. If I'm going into, the world, the secular world, with members who are not my tribe, it's going to be those principles, those, like you said, those foundational principles that's going to hold things together to where, we don't have to necessarily have a physical building. We don't have to have a chapter or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Principle.
Mm-hmm.
This is about the principles. So if let's say we talking about those low information voters, right, in Southern Carolina. Let's just say for pretend. If you are a low information voter, you're still my tribe. I'm not saying that you are, but let's just say that's the case.
Yep.
You go out, hey, you know what? My goal is to have a constructive result for my tribe.
Facts.
Point blank, period. That's it.
That's it.
If Joe Biden's the president and I have to talk to him to get a constructive result, so be it.
Thank you.
I'll do it. If Donald Trump is the president, so be it. Fuck it. I'll do it. Bernie Sanders is the president, fuck it. So be it. I'll do it. It's all about a constructive result for my tribe.
Thank you.
No more, no less. And then when you get those foundational principles down, like you said, the community will build itself.
Thank you. It will build itself. The
don't
community is
necessarily
the
have
end
all
of those
the
principles, not the beginning.
Yes.
I feel you.
And we start to and the narrative, it's like you were saying on the last show, it starts to get distracted away from community into political belief. This is my political belief. If you don't agree with me, something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And they're very good at from what I've seen is, you know, the mainstream media put that bug into ADOS. You know what I mean? Like they kind of said, hey, you know what? This is about political. This is about you guys are a political group. And they kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Push that narrative.
Facts.
You know what I'm saying? So it seems like, oh, this is just a political group. You know, it's not necessarily about even a lineage. It's about, hey, this is our political group. And, you know, this is what we believe. They refer to it in that way, distracted away from the lineage.
The thing is that because I understood, fam, because I know Stakes, you've been around the block a bit. You ain't new to this, right? So when I say this won't be new to you, but this will be new to a lot of other folk, right? I understand initially why the connection between lineage and political advocacy was made, right? Because there was no wrong done specifically in that. The wrongness came when it became required to hold a particular political ideology for people to accept you as lineage, right? In other words, you now have people that will say, you can't claim to be an American descendant of slavery unless you also hold this political type of advocacy or this political type of stratagem or this political understanding. In point of fact, that was never the actual thing that gave #ADOS its power. The thing that gives it its power is our ability to be able to stand in the stead of our ancestors and do whatever is needed for justice.
Right.
Period. I could care less about, I'll throw fire, shade, and smoke at a politician with the best of them. I'll then turn around the next week and engage that same politician if it means something constructive for my people. I won't even hesitate. Exactly. I won't blink. I won't waver. I'll walk right into the office, sit down, and be quiet and calm as humanly possible, having a dialogue. And that's with Donald Trump. That's with Bernie Sanders. That's with anybody. I don't give a damn.
Right.
Because to me, what empowers me isn't the politics of it. It's the lineage connection. It's, can I do something for my tribe? Period. Exactly. The end. In every area of human activity. Not just politics, not just economics. Right. What can I do to create, maintain, sustain, and grow the connection that should be there due to the fact that we share lineage and heritage and history together? That's the question that drives everything I think about, feel, want, and do.
And once you drive, and once that question, and that's how you answer, that's how you measure it. That's how you measure your day-to-day interaction. Am I doing something that's going to benefit my tribe?
Facts.
And whatever you do, that now you know, okay, I'm doing what I shouldn't be doing because this is not really beneficial to my tribe.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That'll guide you on what to do, what not to do. Because a lot of times, like the caller before, he kind of seemed like he doesn't really know what to do. Like, well, how do I do this? Or how do I, you know what I mean? Like, it's confusing. And it was I'm not going to lie, it can kind of get confusing. Mm-hmm. Once you start to get back to foundational principles, everything is clear.
That's oh my God, thank you, Stakes is High. If there's nothing else that I have gained from this understanding of things, right? The one thing that I've gained is clarity, right?
Right.
You know, they say, I love my Christian brothers and sisters. They say that God is not the author of confusion. In other words, wherever you find confusion, if you trace it back far enough, there's a devil somewhere involved in that shit. Right?
Right.
You feel me? Because if you have the understanding of the light brings clarity. You shine light on circumstances and situations, it makes shit clear. So where there's confusion, there's murkiness, there's just shade, there's some devilry at work, right? So now if we take and we understand that concept and tie it to this, the analogy and tie it to this. The acceptance, the acknowledgement and the acceptance and the activism driven by lineage brings clarity. Nobody needed to tell me, Mark, you know, now that you understand this, you need to stand up and be an advocate. Nobody needed to tell me that. The advocacy was driven. I could not. Stakes, I know you're going to appreciate when I say this, right? I could no more not advocate for my tribe at this point than I could make myself stop breathing. There's no ambiguity there. Everything is driven for the benefit and advocacy, the growth, the uplift, the maintenance, the abundance of my tribe. Period. It makes everything so clear and simple that you can't fuck it up.
Right, exactly.
Because if you get to see people, my mother, shout out to Lil Fat, by the way, Lil Fat Black. When she used to tell me shit all the time that didn't make sense to me until I got older. And one of the things that she told me when I was younger that I truly believe nowadays is that niggas make shit complicated to make themselves seem important. Right? It's almost as if the more hard it is, the more convoluted it is, the more the conspiracy weaves through this, through that, through this, the more likely it is to be true or right or good. No. When you look at nature, the most simplest organisms are the ones that endure. Right? We've seen species after species go extinct in our lifetime, but there's a species of animal on this planet that has been around since the beginning. That's bacteria. Bacteria are the most simplest life forms on the planet Earth, and they're everywhere. You could drop nukes on the planet right now and kill everything with 2 legs, hands, arms, eyes, feet, ears, and bacteria will still be here. Making shit complicated don't make it endure. Getting down to brass tacks, going to the root, getting to the foundation, making it as simple and as basic as possible is what endures.
Right. So that any ADOS person, any person that identifies as FBA, ADOS, Native, Black, whatever, knows, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm going to measure my day. This is what to do. This is what's successful. This is what's not successful. And yeah, don't get me wrong. We can look at books and we can look at, information that, some of the elders have said.
Absolutely.
And, education is I'm not going to down that. I'm not saying just do anything. And of course we have knowledge that we can rely on and we can use. But to make things overly complicated and do all this, there's no chapters of white supremacy. There's no chapters. There's no physical building of white supremacy. There's none of that stuff. Do you agree with the perpetuation and dominance over people who are non-white? Period.
That's as foundational a principle for white supremacy as it gets. Do you agree with, adhere to the idea that all things should work to our benefit over, first and foremost, over anybody else? That's white supremacy in a nutshell. Right? That's how every white supremacist measures their success. Now, they'll use other metrics. They'll say, okay, politically speaking, we had this number of people vote versus this number of people, or the stock market rose this number or that. But that shit's all immaterial. At the end of the day, the measure of true success, the one standard that is upheld is, do we retain our dominance over anybody that ain't white?
Exactly. Yes.
That's it.
And are they eligible to be mistreated? That's it.
That's it. That is it. So, what should be it for us? The same damn thing. I get tired of people telling us, oh, well, you know what, y'all sound like black supremacists. And what's your point?
No.
What's your point? No. What we are is self-interested parties. White supremacists are self-interested parties. Can you blame them?
Right.
No. On an oblate sphere, right, a finite globe, resources are limited.
Right.
So all things being equal, if you identify or cleave to a particular group, You're going to want your group to have more of a share of those resources than anybody else. Not that you, even if you wasn't a schmuck, even if you wasn't a supremacist, right? You would still want, so even if white supremacy didn't exist, whites would still work in their own damn interest. Why? Because they identify as white.
Right.
Like, what's so hard to understand about this for black folk, man? It's all right for us to operate in our own interest first and foremost before anybody else. And the crazy part about it is now with the advent of a group like hashtag ADOS, we don't even need to make it about every person with melanin on the planet Earth. Like, we've made it as simple as it can basically get.
Right.
We just right now trying to work on those of us who share this heritage and this lineage.
You know what's crazy? What happens with, like you said, as far as when black people are in their own self-interest, let's say in this country, right? It seems like we have been the one that's been kind of, when things get better for us, everybody else is going to benefit anyway. To be truthfully honest, like everybody, like we, it seems like, you know, it's like, okay, we look at the Democratic primary. This is very weird, but this is the only real time I've seen white folks following black folks and black folks leading the Democratic Party.
Boy, look, the other day I watched white person after white person after white person. Now, by the way, don't consider this a compliment, fam, because white supremacy will tend to do this. But I saw white person after white person after white person say, I'm voting like black women.
Yeah, I felt like,
and I'm talking about unabashedly. Now, my concern is that white supremacy isn't looking to give up anything anytime soon, right? So sisters need to understand that they're getting gassed up. If white folks are comfortable with telling you that they're trying to vote like you, it's because they are confident that voting like you maintains them. Don't get it twisted. They're not complimenting you when they say vote like a black woman. They're not.
Yeah, I see it, but I was like, oh. I mean, yeah, it'll be, because see, the thing about it is this: it'll be successful, but just not for us. That's the way they're looking at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, these niggers make sense. You know, they seem to know what the hell they're supposed to be doing.
Yep.
But it ain't gonna work for them.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, they're going to make sure it doesn't work for us, but they see this country's history is taking our ideas and using them to the benefit of everybody else and then privatizing the pain to us.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? That's how this whole society is operated since the beginning. Part of us being chattel, right? Our ancestors being chattel was that any intellectual property or ideas they came up with wasn't their property either. It was the property of their owner, the slave master. So we talk about inventions like the cotton gin and shit. Like, you'll never convince me that a white man named Eli Whitney came up with a way to make work easier for niggas. You'll never convince me of that. You'll never convince me of that. What incentive would Eli Whitney have had to make work more easy for black people? Especially when they could have just bought more black people.
Right. No, you're right. But anyway, good call. I'm gonna let the rest of the callers chime in. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, I appreciate
keep it going.
I appreciate you, Brother Stakes, man.
I'm excited about the fact, you know what I mean?
Keep on the lookout, because like I said, we ain't gonna just talk about it, fam. And I think you're gonna be interested in what comes next.
Okay.
I appreciate you,
man,
fam.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too, bro. Peace. August said, I take that as an insult. That's not a damn compliment. You should take that as an insult, sister, because you notice they're not saying that they're willing to vote like black men. Not to throw shade at the sisters. I'm never going to throw shade at my sisters. Hell no. But let's look at brass tacks. Let's look at facts. You notice ain't nobody out here saying, you know what? Yeah, this voting like black women thing don't work for me. I want to vote like the brothers do. There's a reason while white supremacy is gassing our sisters up, trying to get them to vote a certain way and look at things in a certain light. Because at the end of the day, as long as they can dependably count on our sisters voting not in our interest, but in theirs, they're going to back that 100%. When white folks started saying shit like vote like a black woman, that should have been a clarion call right there for our sisters to wake the fuck up and go, whoa, 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 hold on. What y'all talking about? How are we voting that's benefiting you motherfuckers? That should have been an immediate red flag. But instead, because of the nigga, right? Because wherever you find ego, you find the nigga. Because of the nigga, a lot of sisters ate that shit up on Tuesday yesterday. They ate it up. You damn straight. We gonna save America. For who? If I'm not saving America for me and my tribe, I don't give a damn if this motherfucker burns. And I mean that from the bottom of everything that's in me. I'm not evil. I'm not cold. I'm not heartless. I recognize that other people struggle and shit like that too. But if any saving, any activism I do does not have immediate, tangible, specific application to my tribe, I'm not doing it. And if that means that the whole rest of this motherfucker falls apart, so be it. So be it. Because everybody in America has signed on to the racial compact to keep me and my people at the motherfucking bottom of the food chain. What I look like sitting out here being activist and working my ass off and pushing for their shit. That don't make sense. Lowest common denominator. Unsunken one said lowest common denominator. Exactly. Lowest common denominator for us is our lineage and our heritage. I don't need to know shit else. Nothing else. I don't need to concern myself with nothing else, no way else that you operate. Our lineage and heritage combined with grace gives me all the tools and impetus I need to come and cleave to you. That's it. That's it. People trying to make shit complicated to make themselves seem important. And it ain't complicated. Fam, I'm going to go ahead and start to wrap this up. I want to say that I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much, Sister Naima. Thank you, Black Magic, for the super chat. Fam, we about to be about it. We're about to be about it. No shade getting tossed. No disrespect getting thrown at anybody. No. If you're not here, that's all right. That's all right. If you're not here where we're about to try to take this thing, that's all right. We built it for you anyway. When you're ready for it, it'll be available. It'll either be available or we'll know why it's not available and be able to tell you this is a pitfall, this is a trap. But we, the Angry Black Sheep, are about showing and proving. We don't have to proselytize nobody. We don't have to beg nobody. We don't have to sit here and browbeat nobody. We don't have to disrespect nobody. We don't have to shade nobody. All we have to do is do the work driven by our acknowledgement, our acceptance, and our activism. The 3 A's. That's it. So fam, again, I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and join me today. It's been my honor. It's been my pleasure. Y'all are the reason why I get up and do everything that I do. And so with that, fam, I want to wish y'all a great rest of the week, right? We over the hump. I'll see you on Saturday. And I'm going to leave you with well wishes for love, peace, prosperity, and power. Real power to our people.